It's the kind of surge Iraq doesn't need, a surge in violence which has claimed hundreds of lives in recent weeks. What's behind it all? And is it a sign of the US troop surge unraveling just weeks before the start of a planned pullback? A return to violence in Iraq? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. Is Iraq descending back into lawlessness? Because it really did start to claw its way out of the years of violence which followed the 2003 US invasion. Now, though, it is not looking so good. Around 150 people were killed, hundreds more injured in just 2 days by 4 major suicide bombings. The first was on Friday when 2 people blew themselves up at a Shia Muslim shrine in Baghdad just as people arrived to pray. That attack killed 60, injured 125. And just a day before, more than 90 were killed in 2 other attacks. One in the center of Baghdad, where police were handing out aid to displaced people. Another which targeted Iranian religious pilgrims in Diyala province, northeast of Baghdad. But to call these 2 incidents the start of the surge in violence would be wrong, because this has really been building for some time. You might remember that 6 car bombs in one day that happened in Baghdad. That wasn't that long ago. It was April 6, to be exact, around 3 weeks ago. So this increase in violence, quite understandably, is sparking fears the country could return to a situation where these type of attacks happened almost every day. But why now? Well, here's an idea. One theory is it could be followers of the Awakening Councils who may feel disillusioned with the Iraqi government. A reminder, the Awakening Councils, they're called the Sons of Iraq by the US, around 100,000, mainly Sunni Muslims employed by the US as local security. Between 2007 and 2008, they were credited with bringing sectarian violence under control. And since the government took control of these men, fewer than 5,000 have been actively employed by the security services. Many haven't been paid in months. Some say this could lead to them siding with al-Qaeda or other anti-government forces and could even bring about civil war as the US plans that withdrawal. It doesn't help that last month an extremely influential Sunni leader was arrested in Iraq on terrorism charges. He is Adil al-Mashdani, who has been an outspoken critic of the government for some time, saying it's marginalized the Awakening Councils. It's just one idea. We're going to talk about a whole lot of ideas in Iraq at the moment with our guests. In Washington, D.C. is David Mack, a scholar at the Middle East Institute and a former U.S. ambassador. In Amman is Saleh al-Mutlaq, an Iraqi member of parliament. And rounding out our panel in Beirut is Faleh Abdel Jabbar. He is the director of the Iraq Institute for Strategic Studies. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. David Mack, I'll start with you in Washington, D.C. There's one thing I think we should try to clear up very early on. Is this, in your opinion, sectarian violence we're seeing? Is it along sectarian lines?
It clearly is along sectarian lines, but I don't think that means that the instigation is necessarily sectarian. That remains to be seen. There are lots of reasons why members of the Sunni Arab population in Iraq have a grievance against the Maliki government and the Iranian support for that government, but also lots of reasons why they have grievances against the U.S. forces which occupied their cities and areas for so long.
So why does it, you've made the very good point that it looks sectarian, but it's not necessarily. Why does it suddenly become, at least in the media, I think we could say, a sectarian issue when, for example, in Ramadi there were 20 Sunnis dead, in Kirkuk there were 15 to 20 Arabs and Kurds dead, in Baghdad there were those 6 car bombs with a mix of people dead. Suddenly, when it's a big Shia target, then this idea of a return to sectarian warfare comes out.
Well, it's pretty clear that the Awakening Councils, in Arabic, the Sahwa, and the Sons of Iraq militiamen were working closely with U.S. forces, and they are targets to a very great degree of the foreign jihadis and other extremists, Iraqi extremists working with them. But they also feel that they haven't been received by the Maliki government with the same kind of cooperation that they were receiving from the American forces. So they feel squeezed in 2 ways. But it's pretty clear that they are both victims and a potential pool of recruits for anti-Maliki government activity.
Okay, let's go to, excuse me, Saleh Al-Mutlaq, who is an Iraqi MP in Amman, Jordan, for us. Mr. Saleh, this political side of things, tell me what you think about it, because it does seem to be, if not sectarian, then definitely politically motivated, as David Mack has been saying, and perhaps looking at ways to weaken the al-Maliki government.
Yes, I think it's mainly political. Because you could see that these were happening in Salah ad-Din to a Sunni mosque, and then it happens in Kadhmiya, which is a Shiite mosque. So it's mainly political, and in my understanding, it is a struggle between the parties who are in power now and who are scared of the future. The last governorate election shows that the sectarian parties and those parties who are really religious and they have a religious program, they could not, or they did not win in these elections. While those who adopted a national program and national speech, they won in this election. So those who want to come to power again, they have to create the atmosphere and the ground for sectarianism in order to formulate a sectarian list again. So it is not surprising that you will find in the near future that there will be a Shiite coalition again and a Sunni coalition again going in the coming election, the general election. These cannot be supported unless they will find an atmosphere and the ground in a sectarian way. So this is why sometimes you find Sunnis being killed and Shiite being killed. And in my knowledge or my understanding and my estimation, these are being supported by a foreign agenda which wants to bring sectarianism again to the country. And they are not caring about what's going to happen to the country. They want to create violence, and they want probably to make the SOFA also in a different situation or a difficult situation to be implemented.
Just briefly then, what is that foreign influence that you talk about exactly?
Mainly Iran. Iran, I think, is behind what's happening in Iraq. And we've been practicing a lot of people coming to Iraq from Iran. They were trained in Iran. They were doing a lot of bad things in Iran. I know that there is a stamp of Al-Qaeda probably in these explosions. But we should not forget that some of Al-Qaeda, some of these terrorist fractions are being linked to Iran and supported and trained in Iran. And we have a lot of evidences we have seen in Iraq that these groups were being trained in Iran and exported to Iraq.
Let's bring in Faleh Abdel-Jabbar, who's waiting for us in Beirut. Thanks for your time. I'd like to move to the Awakening Councils, because that was something I brought up a little earlier in the program. There is no doubt, I think, that the Awakening Councils worked, that they served a purpose and they helped bridge the sectarian divide. But now you have only 20% of them being incorporated into the police and the army, 80% of them being promised civil jobs and they haven't gotten anything. Why is this Awakening Council not being properly used when it's been proven as a success?
Well, you should ask the government, the Maliki government. The Maliki government thinks that the whole normalization or pacification process is mainly a security thing. That is, capacity building, giving some arms and money to some people to serve as a shield against Al-Qaeda and other terrorists. They seem to forget that this is mainly and basically a political process, a process of inclusion, of broad-based government, of national reconciliation, which involves many aspects to it, like inclusion, constitutional reform, and so on and so forth. The confidence that the Maliki government gained from the improvement in security unfortunately developed into kind of self-complacency and lately developed into a nasty arrogance, and arrogance that that we can do it all alone. We have succeeded, and they started to renege on their promises to some of the Sahwa forces, and the Sahwa forces simply showed some laxation, and at that point Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups seized the moment. And what is required really for the government is to reconsider its positions and see the process as not solely in security-wise terms, but also in political and constitutional terms. This is a basic condition for the reversal of this descent into violence again. Now, having said that, we must also say that the government is under pressures from the Shia milieus and from some certain Sunni groups. Among the Shias, there is this kind of majoritarian thrust, if you like, that we are the majority, demography is democracy, which means that we don't need the others, we can rule alone, we can do this, we can do that. And this translates into this self-complacency and arrogance. On the other hand, there are groups that have some, rightly or wrongly, some fears that the inclusion, unlimited inclusion of the Sahwa into the army, into the security and intelligence services might open up the opportunity for a coup d'etat. It is, I mean, it's I think, a very narrow view and unfounded, really.
But does it leave it open?
It's impossible to have any coup d'etat.
Does it, sorry to interrupt you, does it actually leave it open for the disgruntled members, I guess, of the awakening councils, those who haven't been given jobs yet, does it leave it open for them to even turn against the government? I've read one leader who told the Associated Press if he and his compatriots aren't paid by the end of April, which is only a few days away, then they will, quote, abandon their work. Isn't the Maliki government running a huge risk here?
I mean, does the government, stop paying, salaries to their officers in the military or in the police? Who is the civil servant who doesn't receive, his or her salary at the end of a month? I mean, that was anyhow an individual voice. Let's look at the facts. The Sahwa thing proved a success in the Anbar, but not so in Mosul and in Diyala. Why so? In Anbar, in the Anbar province, it was stage managed, controlled, and engineered by the US, who were very flexible under General Petraeus, David Petraeus, who continued this effort vigorously. Not so with the Iraqi government. And this is the gist of the matter. Why we haven't succeeded, or why there was no success, similar success story in Mosul and Diyala, simply because the government reneged on its promises. And those people, I doubted that some of them are fighting. They won't, they can't be, while they were seeking amnesty, they can't go and kill innocent people as they, that happened. They can't kill innocent people and demand amnesty or demand a vigorous implementation of the reconciliation process. I doubt it. These are misconceptions, I think, and widely spread though. The thing is, as I said, there are two pressures under Maliki. Maliki is trying to win over time because he's waiting for the elections. He doesn't want to be seen as approaching the Ba'athis too fast, too broad, being so generous with them. He doesn't want to be seen in that image. He would like to see to be seen in the image of the man who achieved security, and his whole campaign was built on law and order. And the very name of his list was Dawlat al-Qanun, that's the rule of law.
Right, and I'll just stop you there. I'll just stop you because we are going to talk more about that in a moment, just a little bit later. Just want to remind viewers, you're watching Inside Story, where we're talking Iraq today, the recent rise there, violence there, and what effect it's going to have on a nation still really recovering from an invasion 6 years ago. Our panel, it's David Mack in Washington, D.C., Saleh Al-Mutlaq in Amman, and Faleh Abdul Jabbar in Beirut. Gentlemen, I want to switch focus a little bit now. We will come back to Nouri al-Maliki a bit later, but I want to look at the US presence in Iraq and how all this violence might affect those US plans to get out of Iraq. Have a quick listen to this. This is Secretary of State Hillary Clinton just a few days ago on her surprise visit to Baghdad. She remains, it seems, quite upbeat about progress in Iraq.
It is encouraging to both see and hear about the progress that is being made in Iraq. Our strategy working with you may be in a new phase, but we pledge our full and continuing commitment to Iraq and the Iraqi people. Like President Obama, I condemn these violent recent efforts to disrupt the progress that Iraq is making.
David Mack, I know it's Hillary Clinton's job to be upbeat about things and to try to show that there's progress, but is she being realistic? It must be difficult to fly into a country unannounced when there's bombings going off left, right and centre and say that I'm pleased with the progress here.
Well, Kamal, I think she reflects a very American way of looking at problems. Americans don't look backward. They understand that there were sectarian differences in the past, that the Ba'ath Party is viewed with continuing distrust even after all these years by important people in the Maliki government and in the Shia community and in the Kurdish community. But as far as Americans are concerned, we have to look forward. And if you look forward, what's needed is national reconciliation, better governance, and that in that context of improving governance and national reconciliation by the Maliki government and the Iraqi political class, the United States is going to be there with continuing support.
Well, this is just it. Actually, sorry, you just raised a good point there. I wanted to read you a quote from General Ray Odierno from the U.S. Army saying U.S. troops might stay on beyond the end of June. In particularly, he was talking about Mosul and Baquba if the Iraqi authorities requested. Do you think, given what we're seeing now, particularly that Iraqi authorities might be requesting that and saying, can you stay a little bit longer for us, please?
I can assure you, Kamal, that there is a lot of pressure both within the U.S. military, which has requirements elsewhere for their forces, but also in the U.S. political system to continue with the basic Obama administration strategy of military disengagement. However, if there is a context of some positive political movement and serious efforts by the Maliki government, then if they ask for a continuing U.S. presence, I think it will be looked at very seriously, because basically Americans like to be with a winner. They like to be with a government that seems to be moving forward. What Americans will not tolerate, whether Secretary Clinton believes so or not, but what Americans will not tolerate is to hitch our continuing military presence to a government that is rejecting U.S. urgings for national reconciliation.
Saleh al-Mutlaq in Amman, it would be, would it not, a major embarrassment for the Maliki government if they did have to ask the U.S. to stay on longer. They have known about this June date, which was going to be the pullback from the major cities. They know about the 2011 date for full withdrawal. If they did have to ask for more support, that would harm Nouri al-Maliki, wouldn't it?
It would. I feel that it's very difficult for Nouri al-Maliki, as a knowing his personality, to come and ask the American to stay longer. I think he will go in his vain way to say that we are still controlling no matter what's going to happen. What I want to emphasize here to Mr. David, whom, I think he made some statements in April 2004 from Kuwait, saying that the Americans came without the knowledge of the cultural, ground of Iraq and the Iraqis. And they did a lot of mistakes. I think to rely on al-Maliki and his government to make reconciliation, which is very important for any improvement in security issue and also in the political process issue. To rely on that, I think, is a waste of time. Al-Maliki and his government and the sectarian parties that came with the invasion of the United States to Iraq will never accept a real reconciliation, because they were, based on hate and revenge and trying to isolate the others. Let us put in mind, the political reform which was almost attached to the sofa. We were supposed to do it within 3 months, and there was an agreement between us and the government, and also with the American side, that this political reform document will be adapted, will be applied. But nothing happened from the time of SOFA till now regarding this subject. So what I want to say that without the pressure and the active participation from the world, and especially the American side, on the Iraqi parties who are governing now, and on the al-Maliki government especially, we should not expect real reconciliation in the country. We are going to hear more slogans here and there, but they will not really go to real reconciliation with those whom they have differences with. Al-Maliki wants to make reconciliation with the tribes in order to elect him, not with the those who are his opponent, those who are not, going with what he wants. He wants to make reconciliation with the parties inside the parliament, and he cannot even make reconciliation with the parliamentary members or parliamentary groups. So how can he go to make reconciliation with the Ba'athists or with the resistance or with the previous military group?
To Faleh Abdul Jabbar, because we are starting to run out of time. If not real reconciliation, as Saleh al-Mutlaq's talking about, then what? What does Nouri al-Maliki, what does the government do to A, stem the violence, and B, stop it or try to stop it from happening again?
Well, let me say first that what Mr. al-Mutlaq said rightly, that the U.S. pressure is crucial here. I should add also that it is one crucial factor among many. The other crucial factor that we should take in earnest, in consideration, is this. Al-Maliki was a weak figure, a weak party, squeezed between two giants. On the one hand, we have the fundamentalist al-Sadr. On the other hand, we have the other fundamentalist al-Hakim. And the United Iraqi Alliance was under the control of these two wings. In between, he was the weakest. Now, after the achievement of security, improvement of security, the Prime Minister, grew. He became a giant political figure, and this was translated in the provincial government. Now, the problem is that he knows that he's strong, but within the present power structures in the parliament, he is not. He is strong and he is not strong. He is waiting, I think, for the next elections when he will become his own man. And I think in the period after the elections, we will see new dynamics that will generate enough force to push the things forward more quickly, more rapidly towards reconciliation. And we will see the obstacles coming from these two sundry Shia pressures against al-Maliki, waning and getting weaker.
Mr. Faleh, I'm really sorry.
By the way, the Sahwa movement.
I'm going to have to jump in, because we somehow just keep running out of time on this program. We haven't taken a break, but we're still running out of time, so I'm sorry about that. But my thanks to all our guests, David Mack in Washington, D.C., Saleh al-Mutlaq in Amman, and Faleh Abdul Jabbar in Beirut. Thanks for your time, gentlemen. And you, our viewers, of course, thanks for joining us for Inside Story. You can send us your comments and suggestions to insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, it's goodbye for now.